Imagine you're trying to fix a leaky roof. You grab a bucket, catch the drip, and feel weirdly proud. Problem solved. But a week later, the ceiling's sagging, molds creeping in, and suddenly that solution looks more like a band-aid on a broken bone. This is what happens when we treat complex problems like simple ones. In this video, we're going to take sample topic 3 and use it as a doorway into something far more powerful, learning to think in systems. Because almost everything that frustrates you, broken processes at work, bad habits that won't die, policies that backfire, comes from invisible structures you're not seeing. For the next 15 minutes, I'll show you how to spot those structures, predict unintended consequences, and find leverage points where small changes make a huge difference. No jargon, no PhD in math, just practical tools you can apply today. Before we dive into diagrams and examples, let's get clear on what thinking in systems actually means. A system is just a set of parts that interact over time. Your body, your team at work, a city, even your daily routine. But here's the twist. When parts interact, they create behaviors that none of the parts can produce alone. That's why you can't fix traffic by just building one more lane, or fix burnout by just taking one more day off. In this video, we'll explore sample topic 3 as a simple anchor idea, then layer on key concepts, stocks and flows, feedback loops, delays, and leverage points. Each one sounds technical, but I'll keep it grounded in real situations: health, money, relationships, and creative work. By the end, you'll not only understand these ideas, you'll be able to sketch a simple system on paper and actually use it to make better decisions. Let's start with the most basic building blocks, stocks and flows. Think of a stock as something that accumulates over time. Your bank balance, your fitness level, your reputation, these are all stocks. Flows are what change those stocks: income and expenses, workouts and junk food, helpful actions and mistakes. The trap is that we often stare at the flow and ignore the stock. You feel broke, so you obsess over this month's paycheck, not your long-term spending pattern. You feel out of shape, so you look for a 3-day challenge, not your average week. When you think in systems, you ask, what's the stock here? What's actually building up? Then you look at both inflows and outflows. This tiny shift changes how you approach goals. You stop hunting for dramatic events and start adjusting the ongoing patterns that quietly move the needle over time. Now let's add the heartbeat of every system: feedback loops. A feedback loop happens when a change in a system feeds back to influence future changes. There are two main types. Reinforcing loops amplify what's happening. For example, you learn a new skill, which lets you do better work, which gets you more opportunities to practice, which improves the skill even more. That's a positive feedback loop, success breeding success. Balancing loops, on the other hand, push things towards stability. You get too hot, you sweat. You get too cold, you shiver. In projects, deadlines, budgets, and fatigue often act as balancing forces. The danger is when we misread which loop we're in. We try to push harder in a situation where a balancing loop is already slamming the brakes, or we ignore a runaway reinforcing loop until it becomes a crisis. Seeing loops early lets you design smarter interventions. Here's where systems really mess with us: delays. A delay is the gap between action and visible result. You change your diet today, but your energy and blood work lag behind. You cut a budget this quarter, but the quality drop hits next year. Delays are why smart people make dumb decisions. They react to what they see right now, not to where the system is already headed. Picture steering a boat with a sluggish rudder. If you wait to see the turn before easing off, you'll constantly overcorrect and zigzag. In life, this looks like crash dieting, binge studying, or panicking when metrics dip right after a strategic shift. Thinking in systems means expecting delays and designing around them, committing to consistent actions long enough to see genuine signals, and resisting the urge to yank the wheel every time early feedback feels uncomfortable. So, where do you actually push? Enter leverage points, places in a system where a small, well-placed change creates a disproportionately big effect. Most of us attack symptoms. We answer emails faster instead of fixing how work arrives in the first place. That's low leverage. Higher leverage often lives upstream in rules, incentives, information flows, and mindsets. For example, if meetings constantly run long, you can yell at people to be on time, or you can redesign the meeting format, shorten default slots, or require written briefs. Same problem, very different leverage. In personal habits, changing your environment, removing junk food from the house, charging your phone outside the bedroom frequently beats relying on willpower. When you think in systems, you ask, what's the structure that keeps producing this result? What's the smallest part of that structure I can alter to shift the whole pattern? Let's ground this in something we all experience: procrastination. On the surface, it looks like a character flaw. I'm lazy. But a systems view tells a richer story. The stock might be unfinished important work. Inflows are new tasks and ideas. Outflows are focused work sessions. There's a reinforcing loop. The more you delay, the more anxious you feel. The more anxious you feel, the more you avoid starting, which piles up unfinished work and anxiety further. There's also a balancing loop. Deadlines, consequences, or guilt eventually push you into frantic last-minute action. Now, where's leverage? Not in yelling at yourself. It's in changing task size, breaking work into tiny first steps, adjusting environment, removing distractions, and reshaping feedback, tracking tiny daily wins. By tweaking structure, you can transform the same brain into a very different behavior pattern without magically becoming a different person. Now zoom out to a team or organization. Imagine a growing startup where everyone's overloaded. The instinctive fix: hire more people. But without systems thinking, this often backfires. New hires need training, which pulls senior people away from productive work, which slows everything down, which increases pressure to hire even more. That's a reinforcing loop that can tank quality and morale. A systems view would map the stocks: experienced staff, process clarity, onboarding materials, and identify flows, knowledge transfer, turnover, documentation. Then you might find a higher leverage move: invest in robust onboarding docs, standard operating procedures, and mentorship structures before aggressively hiring. That way, each new person amplifies capacity instead of draining it. The key insight is this: outcomes you label as culture or luck often emerge from structures you can actually redesign if you bother to draw the map. Systems thinking also explains why some social problems seem immortal. Take traffic congestion. Build more lanes, and for a short while things improve. But then people adjust. More drivers hit the road, commutes stretch farther, and pretty soon you're back where you started, sometimes worse. That's called induced demand, a reinforcing loop triggered by a well-intentioned fix. The deeper system includes land use, public transit quality, housing prices, and workplace norms. Focusing only on road capacity is like treating a fever without asking what infection caused it. The same pattern shows up in healthcare that treats symptoms but not causes, or education systems that chase test scores instead of learning. When you recognize these repeating structures, you stop being surprised when simple fixes fail. Instead, you start asking, what feedback loops am I strengthening? What behaviors am I unintentionally rewarding? Another crucial piece of sample topic 3 as systems thinking is boundaries. What you choose to include or exclude from the system. Draw the boundary too tightly, and you optimize locally while making things worse overall. For instance, a department might hit its targets by dumping rushed work on another team, creating bottlenecks elsewhere. On paper, their metrics look great. In reality, the company slows down. Draw the boundary too widely, and the system becomes so complex you feel paralyzed. The art is picking a boundary that captures the key feedback loops without drowning in detail. Practically, this means saying, for this problem, my system is these 3 teams, this time frame, and these key resources. Then you sketch flows and loops just inside that fence. You're not describing the universe, just enough of it to see how your actions ripple beyond the immediate moment. Let's talk about mental models, the invisible software that shapes how we see systems. Two people can look at the same situation and draw totally different system maps. One sees lazy employees, another sees unclear incentives and conflicting goals. Your mental model is itself a system, beliefs, experiences, and assumptions feeding into what you notice and what you ignore. If you assume people only work when monitored, you'll design surveillance-heavy structures that create distrust, which then proves your original belief. That's a nasty reinforcing loop. Systems thinking invites you to question your own model. What am I assuming about cause and effect here? What evidence would actually change my mind? By updating your mental model, you effectively change the blueprint from which you build real-world systems. The leverage is enormous because one shift in perspective can alter dozens of downstream decisions without extra effort. Now, how do you actually practice this without turning every decision into a 3-hour whiteboard session? Start small. Pick one recurring frustration, maybe constant last-minute fire drills at work or never having time to exercise. Step 1. Name the stock. What's building up? Stress levels? Unfinished tasks? Step 2. List inflows and outflows. What adds to the stock? What reduces it? Step 3. Look for loops. Does stress lead to poor planning, which creates more stress? Does overcommitting today sabotage your capacity tomorrow? Step 4. Identify one potential leverage point. It might be a weekly planning ritual, a rule about saying no, or a simple trigger like laying out workout clothes in advance. Then, run a tiny experiment for 2 weeks and observe the system's response. You're not chasing perfection. You're training your brain to see patterns, test adjustments, and learn iteratively. One more nuance. Systems often resist change, even when the change is good. This is called system inertia or resilience. Think of a messy room. You clean it once, and within days, it snaps back to its old chaotic state. That's not random. It's the system reasserting itself. Your habits, storage design, time pressures, and emotional associations with stuff. To create lasting change, you have to reshape multiple elements at once. Declutter, redesign storage, adjust your schedule, maybe even reframe your identity from "I'm messy" to "I'm someone who values clear spaces." The same applies to financial habits, team culture, or health routines. If your first attempt to change a system fails, it doesn't mean the system can't change. It means you discovered how strongly the current structure is wired and where you may need deeper or multiple leverage points working together. Let's pull the threads together. Throughout this video, we used sample topic 3 as a hook to explore systems thinking, the skill of seeing structures, not just events. You learned about stocks and flows, the basic accumulators and movers of any system. You saw how feedback loops, reinforcing and balancing, drive growth, collapse, and stability. We talked about delays that trick you into overreacting, and leverage points where small tweaks beat massive effort. We scaled from personal habits to teams and cities, showing how the same patterns repeat at different levels. We touched on boundaries, choosing what's inside your map, and mental models, the internal systems that shape what you even notice. Finally, we acknowledged that systems resist change and that persistence plus smarter structure beats willpower alone. If you remember nothing else, remember this: every stubborn problem lives inside a system. Change the system, and the behavior almost has to change. If this episode opened your eyes to systems you'd been feeling but couldn't quite see, don't let it stop as an interesting idea. Turn it into a practice. Your next step is simple. Pick one real situation in your life this week and sketch a system map for it. It can be rough, messy, full of guesses, that's fine. If you want more help, I've linked a one-page worksheet and some favorite books and talks in the description. On this channel, we regularly break down complex ideas like this into clear, practical tools. So if you'd like to keep upgrading how you think, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. In the comments, tell me one system you plan to map after watching. Is it your morning routine, your team workflow, your budget. Something else entirely. I read everything, and your examples might shape a follow-up deep dive. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.